Hello, friends on LinkedIn. Jim Collison. I'm here with Jacqueline Robinson, Dr. Jacqueline Robinson. Jacqueline, welcome to LinkedIn Live.
Thank you, sir.
Good to be hanging out with you. We're going to call this Top Talent Thursday, even though we said it Top Talent Tuesday the last time we did this, my Tuesday. Top Talent Thursday. You can say Theme Thursday. As you're listening to us, and we're waiting for some folks to kind of come in here on LinkedIn Live, would love to know the kind of the top talent you're using in your career today. So a little chance to kind of brag on yourself a little bit. Check in the chat room. Let us know what talent you're using or successfully in your career. Jacqueline, let me ask you that question of you. We want to get to know you a little bit. So tell us a little bit
Yeah,
about yourself, and then kind of what you do for Gallup, and maybe throw some talents in there that you think you're using
sure
real well.
thing. Hi, folks. Hi, our LinkedIn folks. So I am a learning and development consultant here at Gallup. I do a lot of work with organizations, leaders, teams on helping them with a strengths-based approach, focusing on engagement to make sure that they feel really connected to the organization that they work for, really purposeful in what they're doing. I think today leading a lot with Achiever. I feel that if anyone has Achiever, you might be kind of pushing through too. It feels like we are just in this wave of busyness right now within the workplaces and spaces. So that's what I'm leaning into. But my full five would be Achiever, Strategic, Maximizer, Positivity, and Relator. And I
That's
see we have another positivity in the room. So
We did, yeah. We got
hello,
check
Positivity Twin.
check in the chat room. We'll post what you're leading with there. And if you don't know your CliftonStrengths top five, that's okay. Get a word that's close to something like that. Let us know what you're successfully using in your career. Jim
Yes.
Collison, I'm the current CliftonStrengths community manager for Gallup, which just means I get to hang out with CliftonStrengths people on the web and around the world all day long. Ranger Woo, Maximizer Communication Activator. All these webcasts are really in a Ranger Woo kind of experience, right? Always trying to manage a lot of multiple. Tiffany's checking in as well, saying woo, and so I always appreciate that.
Yes.
Um, Also, if you want to put a little note in the chat room about how you're doing that, that would be great. We've got a ton checking in. Achiever, some relator, some strategic and connectedness, a little bit of learner checking in. They're going fast now. I think
Yes.
we have our
Look at
I
this.
think we have our audience with us at this point. Thanks for yeah. Let us know a little bit of how you're doing that. We want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Jacqueline, let's dive right in. When we think about uh, knowing, first of all, I mean, to be able to improve our career, we need to kind of know where it's at today, right?
Yes.
And as we think about some simple measures you could do, anybody could do, to kind of think through, like, how am I doing today? What Give us
Yeah.
some ideas on how do I do that for myself? What's just a good personal check on how's my career going?
Yeah. I like doing the gut check just in terms of how am I feeling today? Do I feel like I'm thriving and firing on all cylinders even if I've got a lot of work on my plate, or do I feel like I'm kind of on that struggle bus today? And one of the best ways that you can really start to identify if you're playing in your wheelhouse is to think back to your best day at work. What did that look like for you? What were the responsibilities that you had on your plate at the time? Were there partnerships around you that you were working with? Um, where it was, what was that feeling like? And how can you try to apply more of that today? So, some of those potential same responsibilities, some of those same partnerships, but that's a really good way that we start to work with individuals and helping them think about where they're at their best, where they tend to be thriving.
Sometimes I think we have this word called flow that
Yeah.
happens, right? Can you talk a little, like,
Yes.
how do I know I'm in flow? I mean, because those are great days.
Hmm.
And I think it's important. I mean, I remember I was at a spot in my career where I asked myself, like, when's the best I ever did at work, right? And I'll tell that story a little bit later, but
Hmm.
how do we know we're in flow? What are some clues and some keys to that?
Team. Yes, that's such a good question. I love the flow. I think anyone that's hearing that right now is like, yes. Flow is when you just are lost in the work. You are just I almost relate it to sometimes when you get off work and maybe you're driving home, maybe you're in the office right now and you're driving home and you just kind of switch off. You already know what you need to do and you land in the driveway and you're like, how did I even get here? It's one of those things that happens in the workplace though, where you're just lost in the work and everything just feels like it's flowing. Sometimes you say it's creativity even meets productivity, where you're coming up with new ideas, you're able to overcome challenges with ease. It's those periods of time in the day where you experience ease, excellence, and enjoyment
Mm.
in the work you're doing. That's how I would really think through flow.
Ease, excellence, and enjoyment. Are those 3 obtainable? I mean,
I know.
I think a lot of folks, they get into a career or they get into a job and you get maybe 2 or 1 or 2 of those as opposed to
Yeah.
3, but can you get all 3? Is that possible?
I think it's possible. That goes right back to our talent. So think back to what it is that gives you energy. Where do you feel like you're finding a level of excellence in the work that you do? Where have you received feedback from partners or managers where you've been recognized for the work that you're doing? Those are really good signs, especially if you're just overburdened right now with work and you can't see anything beyond just the work that's on your plate. It's sometimes really hard to identify it. But if you take a pause and step back and really say, yeah, when have I been at my best? When have I received positive feedback? When do I feel like I'm working with ease and the energy is just
Mm.
there and comes easily? It's a good signifier that you might be playing in your wheelhouse, attuned to your talents. So many of you already know your talents. We're seeing those in the chat. But if you don't, you haven't taken CliftonStrengths. Think about what you're just naturally talented at. Is it communication? Is it organization? Is it processing information and delivering it in a simplified manner for people to understand?
I love the fact you brought up kind of recognition as a way to kind of know when you're in that moment. Kind of thinking back
Hmm.
and saying, what have I been where have I gotten good comments from those that I work with?
Yeah.
I think bouncing these ideas off of this is where having some best friends at work sometimes are helpful.
Yes.
To sit down with them and ask questions like, "Where have you seen me do my best?" And I think you
Hmm.
also want to start that conversation with, "I need you to be completely honest with me."
Exactly.
Right? And a best friend at work, somebody that you trust, can be that person, right?
Hmm.
You can kind of say, "All right, I need you to be honest with me. Where have you seen me do my best work? What is that?"
Yeah.
And I think that's a great exercise to kind of sit down and maybe take an inventory of successes. We don't
Hmm.
often do this. Sometimes the corporate culture um, doesn't encourage it, so to speak.
Yes.
Sometimes the culture doesn't encourage it. You got to kind of sit down and say, I think, kind of write down, type it if you need to, write down and say, what are some accomplishments that I've done? And maybe not just those that you would post in your resume on LinkedIn, but what were
Yes.
those accomplishments I'm most proud of? That's, I think, another question to
I
ask
agree.
is, what have I accomplished that I'm most proud about? What brought me great satisfaction in that? What gave
Hmm.
me the ability to do that? What was it about that situation that would allow me to have the kind of success I would have? When we think, Jacqueline, when we think about defining success, can what do you giving as a coach, giving a client advice on defining success, what kind of things, how do you encourage them to look at success?
Ooh. Um, the keyword that I picked up on that you just said is what am I proud of? For me, that's a
Mm,
signifier for a lot of people that that's something that gives them a lot of pride. And it tends to be when we really just take a step back and look at what that pride is about, it's starting to touch on
mhm,
maybe their value system or the purpose that they feel for themselves in life that they want to see, you know, come through not just in their personal life, but in their professional life. And so success is often what am I most proud of? And I've heard people say, I'm really proud of my family. I'm really proud of the mission that we have within the organization that I work for. And I can see how my responsibilities tie in. So I think if I have to help individuals identify and define success, it's what magic have you created that you're really excited about and want to share with the rest of the group or with me today? Or what are you most proud of?
One of the, and I don't see, in this case, I don't see your name, so sorry, but we have a LinkedIn a LinkedIn user. It says somebody watching. Can you do that assessment? You can do that assessment too with volunteering, though.
Yes.
Speak a
Yes.
little bit about the power of some of that work that you're doing in volunteer and how that might have clues to career talent.
Yes. And I so appreciate that this is brought up too, because some people might feel like they're in a position at work and it's just not feeding them and giving them that much energy. And so when people are stuck in that rut or they're experiencing extreme burnout and it's too hard to even identify what you're good at anymore, going back to volunteer work, going back to hobbies and interests you have outside of the workplace is such a great way to start to identify what it is that gives you energy. Who's the audience you're working with? What is the work focused on? What are the responsibilities you have that make it so exciting? And are there ways that you can even incorporate or pull some of that into the workplace? And if not, and you're truly stuck in a rut, for many people, looking at their volunteerism or additional hobbies and interests helps them start to identify the career choice that is best for them or that fits in their wheelhouse the most. So it starts to give you a lot of direction.
I told you I would tell you a story about me and
Yeah.
how this happened, and here we are on LinkedIn Live, and of course we have a Call to Coach and Theme Thursday podcast that
Mhm.
that we do a lot of podcasting now at Gallup, and we have, I think, 8 or 9 different podcasts, about 3 million downloads. I mean, that all started
Wow.
because I started a little hobby podcast, on technology that I started doing for a couple years before we started doing this. And so I was able to kind of take that
Love
hobby,
that.
right? And hobby
Yeah.
volunteer work may fall in the same category, and bring that to an organization when we decided to start certifying coaches around the world. I
Wow.
remember meeting with the leadership at the time and saying, "Hey, I got a way to talk to everybody all at the same time on a regular basis, and it doesn't cost a lot." I mean, I think one of the very first programs we did cost us a bunch of money because we went through a company that didn't specialize in it, and I was like, "Hey, I
Got
know how to do it
it.
cheaper, right?"
Yeah. Use
And
me.
so, yeah, it was a great way to look at, maybe there's something currently I'm doing in a hobby, or I'm
Mhm.
doing in, now it just happened to be that podcasting was super practical for me,
Yeah.
right? By the way, if you're listening, for those listening live, we'd love to have your questions in chat. So as we go along, if you've
Mhm.
got questions, it's moving pretty fast, and I'm trying to get everybody's top 5 in there, but we'd love
It's great to
we'd love to
see.
see your questions in there. So drop those in the chat room. Jacqueline, so that was the moment where I brought I kind of brought that to work.
Mhm.
I would say I used, again, my arranger, woo, communication, those together, because I have to be both a producer and interviewer and a guest sometimes on all these things that we do, right? So lots of
Yes.
things going on at the same time. When we think specifically now, we talk kind of in general about flow and about satisfaction and pride.
Mhm.
But when we look at Clifton strengths in general, someone who knows their top 5, or maybe they're all 34, looking at their current career, how can they kind of overlay that top 5 or those 34, or even our new Clifton Strengths for Manager report? How could they
Yes.
overlay that on their current career that maybe gives them some clues?
One thing that I like to do as an activity for folks is have them list out up to 10 of the key priorities they have, that they're tackling day to day in the workplace, and then look at what it is, what theme or themes you're using to support you in each of those responsibilities. And sometimes people will even identify gaps and say, it's still a struggle for me. And this is a responsibility that's a struggle for me. So that also starts to help you connect the dots as to why it might feel particularly draining, or even why you're really burned out right now because you're spending, 60% of your time focused in that area where you don't feel like your themes can really come out and play. And now that you've got that level of awareness, that's communication you can bring back to your manager or, even partners to see how you can almost trade some of those responsibilities and say, can I delegate this to you? And if there's something you don't like, I actually love that you're doing. Can I put that on my plate? So that's really helpful to just list out, what am I doing and what themes am I using? And as I even look at those responsibilities, What do I love doing the most with
Mm,
ease, excellence, and enjoyment?
yeah.
So that's also going to help you say, oh, that's my sweet spot. I want to find more of that work.
I think there can be some clues in that insight report that we have available. So for
Yes.
even just our top 5 users, you have a strengths insight guide that's there. It's kind of custom statements that are based on all 34 of your themes, whether you've taken top
Hmm.
5 or you have all 34 available to you. It's got some sentences in there, Jacqueline, that I like to go in and I like to find those for myself. Like,
Yes.
what are the ones in here that are really describing what I'm doing today? But I want to add one to that and say, what are maybe some themes that are in there that I want to think about for the future? So kind of what am I doing
Yes.
today? What's working? But what do I desire for the future? What would you add to that?
I really like that because I think this is that time when people are experiencing burnout and they're wanting to reset and think through what is the next 6 months hold for me, because some of my priorities have changed, some of my values have changed. So I love the idea of going through the insight report, highlighting what speaks to you now, what you might not be leaning into that you want to lean into in the future, and saying, okay, now what does that look like professionally? What does that translate to for me? And it
Mhm.
might be connected to some aspirations you have. And that's even connecting the dots to go, oh, that's why I aspire to do it. I didn't even see that. Yep, that's me. That's what I'm looking for is
Yeah.
mentorship, or I want to be able to develop people because I'm a developer. And yeah, I want to take it to the next level and inspire others. And maybe I can be a team lead. And that's what I'm going to go take to my manager now for our
Yeah.
6 month check in.
No, exactly. I mean, an opportunity to go in and say, "Hey, I'm kind of thinking about this."
Hmm.
You don't. James has got a great question I'm going to get to in a second here, but I think the important thing, it doesn't always have to be someplace else. Like
Yes.
in my case, and let me bring up James' question because it's so important. He says, "Can either of you talk about times you had paradigm shifts in
Hmm.
your career?" And just at Gallup, like I haven't even left
Yes.
Gallup, but I started as a technology manager. And in the middle, a couple years into that, I said, "Hey, I'd really like to go and recruit. Like, we need
Yeah.
students in an
So good at it
internship
too.
program, and let me go recruit." And so they took some responsibilities away and gave me some recruiting responsibilities. And I did that for a while, developed some internship programs and things like that. Then this opportunity to webcast came along, and
Mhm.
so we shifted. I did even less management. I did half-time recruiting, half-time webcasting for a while. When the pandemic hit, the recruiting, of course, went away, and I went full-time webcasting, right? And
Yeah.
full-time community management. Turns out there's a lot more to community management that was available to do that I wasn't doing. I didn't have time to do, right? Kind
Ye
of based on my time, but Jacqueline, for me, that was 3 just to Gallup. Not I that's not like I had to change organizations to get that done, right? 3
Yes.
very distinct paradigm shifts as James says. Any has that can you give any
Yeah.
personal experience for you?
It's really helpful too when you're in an organization and you've got managers and leaders that support your growth and development and that capacity to kind of share out what your interests are and to allow to have them support you with that development and let you even try and fail as you manage it along the way. Um, so I'll preface it with that. I think we're really fortunate here to be able to do so. And it was a similar experience. I started in talent selection, supporting hiring managers with helping them think about their candidates' predictability to succeed in the role. And then I started shifting into learning and development because I loved front facing with individuals as well. So to be able to speak about CliftonStrengths and employee engagement with leaders and teams was really exciting. And getting back on the road because I'd been so used to traveling previously.
Yeah.
Now I'm working with you, and we just started to really find a cadence too with podcasting. And I think I lead with futuristic as my number 6. So some of you might, and it's always about, oh, what's next for me? What's the next step? What's going to be thrilling? What do I want to do? CliftonStrengths, I think, is so helpful, even going back to the insight report and helping us have a better understanding of what drives us and why we want to do certain things. And that, I think, really allows us to communicate it more effectively to management to say, hey, this is what I'm seeing for myself. This is why I'd like to consider this as a new approach. And one thing that I would also add as a caveat for people in that paradigm shift is once you're thinking about what's next for you, and it might look like it's a little different or you're shifting gears from your existing role. One thing that's always been helpful that I share with leaders is leaders, teams, individuals is think about how it's beneficial for you, but also the manager or the team or the organization. So almost see yourself as the judge, and you're listening to your argument for why you feel that's a good fit for you, and you're sharing how you're naturally talented and you've got some hobbies and interests, or any benefits that you're pulling in from that. And then also look at the other side. What's the manager thinking? What's going to be their perspective? How is what you're asking for going to benefit the overall team goal or the organization's goal? That can really just help you in that position too.
That's such great advice. We have there's no way we can cover this topic in 30 minutes. I mean, we're going to try because I have Maximizer and we are going to try. But
Yeah.
we do have a page, and Riley, who's backstage, is going to drop the link to that in the chat here, so
Mhm.
you have access to it. But we've got a page with some resources on how to improve your career, and we'd ask you head out if you want to get more information when we're done here. It's a great kind of a great resource
Yeah.
to go out and get that. Steve asked a great question in the chat room. He says, so how do you think theme intensities change when moving between
Ooh.
personal and professional responsibilities? And I'll even add changing between professional and professional responsibilities. I mean,
Mhm.
I'm gonna think about this in the context of how did maybe in my talent set, how did those intensities maybe be used differently when I moved between recruiting and webcasting? But
Mhm.
Jacqueline, let me throw that to you on thinking about that. How do you think those intensities change when we're moving or going from home to work? Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. What I always share just off the bat is they're always on. It's just a matter of, is achiever going to be on boil in the workplace because there's a lot to get done right now, and then is it going to be dialed down, and maybe relator is going to be dialed up when I get home a little bit, to just reconnect with family and friends as a way to re-energize. So it really is more like regulation. Our themes are always on, but the way they show up is going to be slightly different. Even if we just take achiever to achiever, professional to personal life, achievers in the workplace might be focused on, oh, I got so many things done today. I just checked boxes on all these different priorities I had. At home, that achiever's still on, but now that box is, ooh, I got done 3 loads of laundry. Ooh, I just ran errands in 2 hours and got everything knocked out. And it was all while my child was at soccer practice. So it's still running. It's just looking a little bit different. And we're dialing up the intensity and dialing down the intensity based on role in the workplace or from personal to professional life.
Micah Librant and I spend all of season 6 of Theme Thursday. So if you haven't listened to one of our Theme Thursday podcasts on each one of the individual themes, we have one for every single theme that we have out there. 6
Mhm.
seasons of it. So that 34 times 6, there's a bunch that's out there for you and available. Search Gallup Theme Thursday on any podcast app or on YouTube, and you'll find that an opportunity. But we spent a whole season talking about themes at home, themes at work. And
Mhm.
Jacqueline, you couldn't have said it any better than Micah does on that oftentimes our personal and professional life, we see the same things happening just in
Yes.
different ways, right? Just in different ways. I was able to take the hobby podcast, Arranger Woo Communication, move that as hobby. I just do it for fun,
Yep.
move it to work, do it professionally. In fact, have, I think, more success. Like it's been greater amounts of satisfaction at work than it was as a hobby. It's gone
Mhm.
way larger, way bigger numbers, way more downloads at work. And then all my podcasting friends, when I tell them I get to podcast for a job, they're like how
That's
did
so
you
cool.
do that? I'm a little bit lucky in that sense. I am a little bit lucky. Sabrina, I want to go back a little bit to a question. We're going to talk about burnout here
Yes.
in just a second, but love some advice to review the Insight Report to see what currently resonates strongly. Any other resources you'd recommend to get reconnected to our own strengths so much with some after so much change?
I love that question. I saw it come through, and I was really hoping we'd have time to address it too. Um, you know what some people have been doing lately, and I think it's a really good idea, is just um, even getting away from a resource and just self-reflecting a bit. So some have really just been journaling to get everything out there. How am I feeling at the end of the day? what gave me a lot of energy today, and what drained me of my energy today. And if you're doing that, even over the span of a week, you'll start to get some insights on what are those personal and professional things that have given me energy. It's probably going to look a little bit different, especially with all the change than maybe it did 6 months ago or pre-COVID. And what's draining me of my energy? That's going to allow you to then ask a question. Is it because I have too much of it? I love it, but it's just too much. Or is it this got put on my plate because we're short staffed and they needed me to take it over, and I'm just having to kind of chug along and get it done? And if that's the case, one thing that I would even think about is this long term, or is this something that I just need to ride out for another month? And if so, what are those things that I love that I've been journaling about? Maybe it's getting outside and walking in nature. Maybe it's being able to reconnect with friends on Zoom, or, to see family or play with the kids. So how can you give yourself more of that? And throughout all of that, you'll likely really start to see some themes show up too. So if it's that reconnection of family that's been really helpful as you get through all of this crazy change, and you've got relator or empathy or connectedness or individualization or any of those, you might go, oh, okay, that theme needs to be fed a little bit more right now. I want to water that lawn because I'm overwatering over here, and this responsibility needs to get dialed down.
Don't remind me. I watered my lawn all last year during the pandemic, and it looked terrible. This year, I was like, I'm not going to do it, and it looked great. So, you never know. Thanks for bringing up that pain, Jacqueline. Let's bring burnout in because it's been a big topic, and of course, well-being. We have a brand new book, Well-Being at Work, that's got lots of advice. In fact, you and I are going to spend some time later on this fall, late this fall, looking at some of the resources in that. We have a well-being series going on right now. So if you go to gallup.eventbrite.com, you can sign up for the first 2 of 5 parts. Jacqueline's going to join us for part 5. So we're excited about that. Get signed up for those. They're just like this, a little bit longer, but we'd love to have you come out and join us for those. But Jacqueline, when we think about it, just in the quick few minutes we have left, when we think about that, how can we approach from a strengths perspective? How can we approach that? By the way, I think right now, with what's going on in organizations, there's great opportunities to improve your career. Like, start looking around and start helping people on things that can be done. But what do you think?
Yeah, I would say first and foremost that you're not alone if you're experiencing burnout. Our research shows 76% of employees have experienced burnout at least sometimes. So it's there, it's relevant. Going back to your question, gosh, how do we control for it? How do we manage it? I would say that some ways that you can unpack that is with role clarity. Role clarity with your manager, but also what is it that you want to do more of for yourself, for your own well-being in the workplace? What are those responsibilities, so that you can go back and feed that to your manager to say, is there a way to do this? So we recognize that a lack of role clarity, a lack of development, and not having the materials you need or resources you need to do your job well can be really impactful. So going back to CliftonStrengths, or the talents you have, think about how you're playing to them right now. Are you able to? Are you leaning into them too much? And that's actually creating some burnout too. And then go back to your manager, if at all possible, to say, hey, I've been thinking it through. I'm overworked here. Can we delegate some of this out? Or look for ways that you can, even within your own span of control, start to shift some of the responsibilities you have on your plate to create more balance.
I think everybody's questioning everything right now. I just think it's a great
one big
opportunity.
Existential crisis.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's both personally, professionally, in a team setting. I mean, I think this is a great opportunity for teams to start, for managers to start getting teams together and saying, hey, that we have that question on our Q12. I get the opportunity to do what I do best.
Yes.
I think that's every day. I think that's a question we need to be asking ourselves. We need to be asking our teams. We need to be asking our organizations. Hey, as an organization, CEOs, are we aligned for what
Yes.
the new world is like here,
Right.
or we get an opportunity to do our best every day. Jacqueline, we are out of time. I know on the internet there's
I
infinite
know.
time, but we're out of time. We know we got to get you to
Yeah.
the next thing. But thank you for
Thank
joining
you,
me.
sir.
Good to have you. Thanks to
Yeah.
everybody in the chat room. I know there's some questions we just couldn't answer. If you've got a burning question and you want to get it to us, send us an email, coaching@gallup.com, and we'll get that routed to the right person. But Jacqueline, thanks
Yes.
for spending some time with us.
Hey, thanks, Jim. It was a pleasure.
Yeah. Thanks everybody in the chat room for coming out. We'll see you next time. We've got more of these. So make sure you're following CliftonStrengths on LinkedIn. And Riley's going to take good care of you out there. So make sure you're out
Yes.
there following CliftonStrengths for future events. Take care, everybody.